The wife of the Prime Minister of Spain, Pedro Sánchez, has been prosecuted for 4 crimes. Let's get started. Music. Hello everyone and welcome to a new edition of Precautionary Measures, and pay close attention because today we have some very important legal news. The wife of the Prime Minister of Spain, Begoña Gómez, is closer to standing trial for no less than 4 crimes. Let's share this information as we always do. By the way, if you haven't done so already, remember to subscribe to the Precautionary Measures channel so that this community keeps growing. And let's go straight to this important information because, pay attention, the wife of Pedro Sánchez is closer to being tried for no less than 4 crimes. We already have this information on the screen, which we are going to review and comment on. Judge Peinado orders Begoña Gómez to stand trial on 4 charges. Judge Juan Carlos Peinado has indicted the wife of the President of the government, Begoña Gómez, for 4 crimes, while acquitting her of the crime of unauthorized professional practice. Begoña Gómez was under investigation by the Judge of Investigating Court No. 41 in Madrid, Juan Carlos Peinado, for the commission of up to 5 crimes: influence peddling, business corruption, embezzlement of public funds, misappropriation, and unauthorized professional practice. Well, in a 39-page order that we have accessed, the judge orders the wife of Pedro Sánchez, his advisor at Moncloa, Cristina Álvarez, and the businessman Juan Carlos Barrabés to stand trial. This order literally states the proceedings against Begoña Gómez, María Cristina Álvarez, and Juan Carlos Barrabés are to continue for the alleged crimes of influence peddling, corruption in business in the private sector, embezzlement of public funds, and misappropriation. The document explains that it also states that Barrabés is currently only being prosecuted for the crime of business corruption and influence peddling. The judge also says that there are no grounds for extending the current investigation. In other words, Judge Peinado does not want to continue prolonging the investigation of the case. Even though Begoña Gómez's defense had requested new expert evidence during the meeting they were summoned to on April 1st. In fact, the Actewar prosecution had also requested an update on the salaries of Cristina Álvarez, Begoña Gómez's advisor in Moncloa. However, Judge Peinado dismisses these requests, stating that there are no grounds for them and pointing out that they do not contribute anything new to the investigation. In this way, the magistrate opposes prolonging a case that was already heading to trial, but which seemed like it could be unexpectedly extended with these new requests. The defense of Begoña Gómez is led by Antonio Camacho, former Interior Minister from the Socialist Party and right-hand man to Alfredo Pérez Rubalcaba. He had requested the testimony of the co-director of the chair that Begoña Gómez led, the chair of competitive social transformation at the Complutense University, and a study on the role of previous advisors to the partners of the prime ministers, precisely to compare it with the role that Cristina Álvarez, the current advisor to Begoña Gómez at La Moncloa, would have played. It is surprising, says the judge, to request this testimony at this moment, that of the co-director of the chair, when such a request could have been made throughout the entire investigation, while repeatedly maintaining the argument that the investigation was being unnecessarily prolonged and had too many witnesses. This witness cannot contribute anything except what is already included in the reports received from the Complutense University of Madrid and its School of Government. Nor is it proven or indicated how such testimony could be useful or necessary without prejudice to the possibility of requesting it at another stage of the proceedings. If there were any, Peinado retorts, reproaching Begoña Gómez's lawyer for his procedural strategy of now trying to extend the investigation period. In the same order, another matter should also be highlighted, which is that Judge Peinado argues that the evidence that led him to formally charge Begoña Gómez for those 4 crimes we have discussed also leads him to acquit the wife of the socialist leader of the charge of the alleged crime of unauthorized professional practice. This focused on Begoña Gómez signing several procurement documents from the Complutense University of Madrid, for which the judge thought a certain qualification was necessary, something that several witnesses have denied. since there is only one weak indication with no multiple and solid indications, and there is evidence to the contrary supporting the possibility of signing the document. By Begoña Gómez, who is under investigation, the proceedings regarding that crime of professional misconduct must be dismissed. The judge has ruled. Even so, the investigation process has not been definitively concluded, because although he rejects these new investigative steps requested by the defense and by the popular prosecution, there are still some invoices and an expert report that Penado had already requested previously that need to be included in the investigation. What we're talking about is that the investigation of the Begoña Gómez case is possibly coming to an end, and that doesn't necessarily mean that Begoña Gómez will go to trial for those 4 crimes. Now it has to be decided by the Provincial Court of Madrid once the order formally opening the trial is issued. It should be noted that it will be heard by a jury, which means it's not the usual procedure we're used to in most cases, but it can be done. The beginning of the end of the Begoña Gómez case is already starting to come into view, so that she ends up on trial for, at the moment, 4 possible crimes. 4 possible crimes such as embezzlement, influence peddling, business corruption, and misappropriation. As mentioned, unauthorized professional practice has been ruled out. This is in the case of Begoña Gómez, but today we also just came from the Supreme Court trial of the Koldo case. And today, of course, the statements have been a bit weaker than in other sessions last week, which were more intense, but I would highlight the one from Koldo Garcia's ex-wife, that he was an advisor to José López Patricia Uriz, who arrived at the Supreme Court wearing a wig, well, with her face covered so she wouldn't be recognized. Well, during her statement, she once again mentioned that she was in charge of advancing expenses for the Minister of Transport, related to many issues, among them including the famous Friends of Ábalos, among other matters. And then she also said that different envelopes of expenses for the former minister were managed, and that there were, well, the expenses tied to party headquarters on Ferraz Street and the expenses from the Ministry of Transport. For the expenses of the Ministry of Transport, once the receipts, tickets, etc. were provided, a transfer was received. However, and this seems to me very, very relevant, very important, in the case of the Socialist Party headquarters on Ferraz Street, the receipts were provided and Ferraz always paid in cash, always in envelopes full of cash. Okay? And you might ask, why is this important? This suggests possible money laundering. I'm not saying the Socialist Party laundered money, just that it's an indication of alleged laundering. Why was everything paid in envelopes? When we're talking about expenses of 2,000 euros, 3,000 euros, 1,000 euros, we're not talking about 50 euros or 100 euros, no. We're already talking about significant amounts. Why was it always paid in cash? Always in envelopes, always with bills? Well, that's a good question to put on the table. By the way, from now on, I'm also going to answer some questions you ask me that you leave for me in the comments. Actually, someone asked me a question the other day and I just remembered to answer it now. They asked me why in last week's testimony from Carmen Pano, the famous businesswoman who took 90,000 euros in 2 bags to the Socialist Party headquarters on Ferraz Street, hasn't Aldama corroborated it, and why does Aldama deny it? Well, it should be said that Aldama in the Koldo case has admitted to criminal acts that are even more serious. And it's true that regarding the delivery of those supposed bags with money with bills at the Socialist Party headquarters on Ferraz Street, Aldama has always denied it. He has always denied it. And I have to tell you that speaking with some sources from the case, there are other sources who deny it. And what they tell me is that Carmen Pano heard rumors somewhere and that she has told a story that seems to be based on real events, exactly as Carmen Pano tells it, okay? That's the information I have received. Could it be that this happened, but instead of Carmen Pano, someone else made the delivery? Yes, it could be. It could be. I'm not 100% sure, but one possible hypothesis is that Carmen Pano made herself the protagonist of the story, but in reality, someone else did it, and in that way, she's giving herself some prominence. But it's not certain, and I have to give you all the information because you asked me why doesn't Aldama confirm it. What about Aldama then? Well, precisely because of that, because Aldama says that Carmen Pano made it up. That version about handing over the bags with a total of 90,000 euros is given by the Socialist Party on Ferrer Street. That's the point, and I'm giving you the information so you have it. And that's it for this edition of Precautionary Measures. I hope you enjoyed the video. Like I said, you can now leave your questions for me. Leave me a question, leave your comments. If you like the video, your likes. I always like to read your messages, information, questions, encouragement, everything. Honestly, they're always very well received, so thank you very much. You can now become members for less than 3 euros as the chosen ones, or for less than 7 euros as the supreme ones. You can also make contributions. Contributions via Bizum at 627556370. That's 627556370. The main thing, as I always say, is making sure everyone gets this info because information is power. See you soon. Bye.